In this video, you will get lessons from this #1 bestseller book. I'm offering this lesson to you for free as part of my company's mission to help you reach your music dreams and have fun along the way. You will find the playlist with all videos from this course in the video description and comments. There may be information in previous videos that will make the video you are watching now easier to understand. I recommend watching the videos in order. Hi, I'm Dan Spencer, author of the Best Music Theory book for beginners. Over 5,000 people have purchased this book, pushing it to hit #1 bestseller in its category on Amazon. Finally, if you would like to get this #1 book, the workbook, for free, along with quizzes, interactive flashcards, and more bonuses, links are in the video description and in the comments. And now, here is the next lesson and the Best Music Theory course, Level 1. Welcome to your bonus, the Boss Fight pack, where you are going to analyze and understand 10 game themes in lead sheet style. So remember, #1, figure out the key of the piece of music. #2, write the key down. #3, do a scale degree analysis. #4, do a Roman numeral analysis. After you complete each theme, hop in and watch the video of me breaking down and talking about the theme. Don't watch the video first, because I'm going to be talking about what key it's in. I'm going to be talking about the chords. Use that as your check to make sure you've done it right. So first do the theme by yourself. Go one theme at a time, and after you complete your analysis of the theme, hop into the video for that theme and do the breakdown with me in real time to check and see if you've done it right, if you're thinking about it the right way, or if you need to go back and do some corrections. I will see you in the first video where we are going to break down the main theme from Halo. I'll see you there. Welcome to your first boss fight, the Halo theme. Now here's the thing, if you've not already gone through this, doing your own analysis, do not watch this video. Stop! Go do it one time, then come back and follow along. Okay, so the first thing for us to do, as always, is to find the key of the song. So let's look at our key signature. We have 1 sharp. Okay, so that means we're either going to be in the key of G major or E minor. Next thing for us to do is to look at the chords. Okay, we have an E minor. Sure enough, over measure 1. And then we have, well, no more chords for the rest of this music here. So this E minor is going to apply to all the measures, which means the only chord is E minor, which means there's no way this is in the key of G major, because there isn't even a single G major chord. On top of that, if we think about it from an E minor perspective, we start and end on an E note. We're starting and ending on what would be scale degree 1. Very unlikely you're going to start and end a song on scale degree 6 if this was in G major. And then on top of that, looking at our first 2 measures, we have E, G, A, F. Okay, well, second measure doesn't give us much, but in our first measure we would have 1 and 3, which are common notes from minor. And then of course we end in the last measure with scale degree 1. So yeah, we are unequivocally, most certainly, in the key of E minor. So let's do a scale degree analysis. So the first thing for us to do is to go under the first line of staff and to write scale degree E minor. Then put our little colon. Okay, so we start with 1, 2, 3, 2, keep it going, 4, 3, 2, 1. Then we have a rest. And then we're going to go 5. Now here's where we go. We go to 6. Now this is not a flat 6. No, it is not flat 6, because you can see that there's a sharp right here, and that sharp is going to raise the C note up 1/2 step from where it would normally be in the E natural minor scale. Normally the E natural minor scale, it's all the same notes as a G major scale. So typically that scale degree 6 would just be a C natural, but in this case we have a C sharp, which means we're going to take away that flat accidental from the scale degree. Then we have in measure 5, scale degree 7. And then we go, ooh, another raised 6th. So no flat there for that because that's at C sharp again. 4, 6. Again, this is raised because this accidental holds power for the whole measure. And we go to 5. And then we jump down an octave. 5, 7, 1, 3, 4, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 2, 7, 1. Okay. So before we talk about connections, let's make sure we add our Roman numerals. We're going to do E minor. I'm just going to add a Roman numeral 1, and that's going to apply for the entire piece of music. So a couple interesting things for us to look at here with this melody is that it's based off of what's called a Gregorian chant. We're not going to get too far into Gregorian chants. But what is interesting is to look at the groupings of the scale degrees. So what I mean by that is this. We can see over here we have 1, 2, 3, 2, 4, 3, 2, 1. So we don't have 5, we don't have 6. And then here we have 5, 6, 7, 6, 4, 6, 5. Very different, right? Completely different scale degrees than what we had at the beginning. Now we're going to see a mix come together. 5, 7, 1, 3, 4, 2. 4, 2, there it is. And then we have 1, 3, 2, 1, 2, 7, 1. So we have these 4 distinct groups in the melody. And what's interesting is to see how the scale degrees are grouped together. We have 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s in our first one. In our second one, we have 5, 6s, 7, 6, 4s, 6, 5. In our third one, we have a mix. 5, 7, 1, 3, 4, 2. And in the last one, we have 1, flat 3, 2, 1, 2, flat 7, then coming back to 1. Now, what's also interesting to notice here, we're going to see this through a lot of these boss fight songs, is that the melody changes, and because the melody changes how low it is or how high it is, that actually creates something interesting happening in the song. So we can see here that the melody is pretty low, and then here the melody goes higher, and then the melody's back down low, and then pretty much stays low. So if we were to imagine this melody, we could say, all right, it starts low, it goes high, it comes back down, then it sort of starts where it ends. So that's sort of the shape of the melody. And that's an interesting thing to think about. That's also an interesting way to look at the melody. That we have low, high, nipping down a little bit, and then sort of back to where we started, because indeed we start and end on an E4. I will see you in the next boss fight. In this boss fight, we're going to be breaking down Kakariko Village, the theme from A Link to the Past. Now, you can also hear this same theme in slightly different versions in other Zelda games, but we're going to take this one straight from A Link to the Past. So let's start by looking at our key signature. All right, key signature, no sharps, no flats. That means we're either in the key of C major or A minor. Now let's take a look at our chords. Okay, we have C, A minor, D minor, G, C, A minor, D minor, G, C, A minor, D minor, G. That's a lot. Ooh, F, G, C, A minor, D minor, G, C. Going all the way, all the way, all the way, all the way. Yes, one's a long one. Looking at all the chords, looking at all the chords. Page 4, looking at the chords. Okay, we end on a C. All right, so we start and end on a C chord. There are some A minors around, but based on the prevalence of C chords that we're seeing, Plus, something else that's cluing me in here is that there is a chord progression here happening. There's a series of chords that's repeated over and over again, and that is, if we think about it from the key of C major, 1, 6, 2, 5. So C being 1, A minor being 6, D minor being 2, G being 5. And to think about that from an A minor perspective, you would have 3, 1, 4, 7, which, okay, sure, that is a chord progression that one could use. However, 1, 6, 2, 5 is actually a common chord progression. I know that's not in the book, but it is not a modern common chord progression, but back in like the 40s and the 50s when they were taking music theater pieces and turning them into jazz, this was a common chord progression that you would see all the time. So it's an old-fashioned common chord progression, but a common chord progression nonetheless. So I have a high degree of confidence not even looking at the melody. We just look at the first and the last note of the melody, which are both C, right there. On top of that, just looking at the strong and weak beats, we're in 3/4. Just our first two measures are strongest in measure 1 would be scale degree 1, strongest in measure 2 would be scale degree 3. Plus, on top of that, all the notes in the first two measures are literally chord tones from a C major triad. We have C, G, C, E, C, G. If you think about it, root, third, fifth, we have C, E, and G. What we have here is the chord actually broken up into arpeggios. We'll learn more about arpeggios in theory too. So, high degree of confidence just looking at the chords and the first and the last note. This song is in C major. Because even if we thought about this from an A minor perspective, yeah, sure, we would have flat 3 on beat 1 of the first measure as our scale degree, and then we would have 5 in measure 2 on beat 1. But still, the fact that it's over a C chord, we keep on seeing that this chord progression, the C comes around every time. Yeah, C major is the key. Okay, so let's do a scale degree analysis. Scale degree, C major is the key. 1, 5, 1, 3, 1, 5, 6, 3, 6, 1, 6, 3, 2, 6, 1, 5, 1, 6. Ooh, 5, 5 up an octave, 2, 4. First time we've seen 4. Hello, 4. And then 2, 5. Then a nice long 1. Then 5. Then 3. Then 1. Then 5. And 5, well, 5 is tied. And then we have 5 down an octave. Then we go to 1. Then we go to 5, 3, 1. That 1 didn't really look like a 1, but that's okay. 5 goes along, goes along, goes along. 5 again. All right, that was page 1. Here we go on page 2. Starting measure 25. 6. Ooh, 7. 6 up an octave. 5. Well, not up an octave from the last time I was there, but hey, that's okay. 3. Oh, that's 3 again. Oh, that's 3 again. 2. Back to 1. Let's make sure you can see that 1. There we go. 5. 2, 1. 5. 3. 1. 5. 5. 1. 5. 3. 1. 5. 5 again. All right, we're on page 3. Measure 57. 6. 7. Oh, I remember this. 6. 5. 3. I say I remember this because we actually did very similar things a page ago, 2 pages ago. Something like that. 3. 3 again. 2. 1. Oh, 1 again. Oh, 1 again. Actually, you could see that measure 73. It's 1 again. Then 7. Then 2. 1. 5. 4. Nice to see you. 4. 3. 4 again. 5. 3. 1. Page 4, final page. Measure 89. 1. 7. 2. 1. 5. 5. Measure 97. 4. 3. 2. 1. And now we're back to the beginning. 1. 5. 1. 3. 1. 5. 6. 3. 6. 1. 6. 3. 2. 6. 1. 5. 1. 6. Last line, starting in measure 109. 5. Move up the octave. 2. 4. 2. That's 5 there. Getting complacent there. 5. 1. There we go. All right, that's a scale degree analysis. Now pay attention to these scale degrees. The reason why you're doing the scale degree analysis, number 1, is so you can break down and understand the melody. But number 2, if you ever plan on composing and writing your own melody someday, understanding which scale degrees are used where in relation to which chords is going to be a very, very useful thing to know and understand and have in your mental memory bank. All right, let's do our Roman numerals. All right, the key. We have a 1. Then we have a 6, 2, 5, 1. Now, as we said, we have this chord progression here, so it's going to repeat several times. 1, 6, measure 13, 2, 5, 1, 6. And then we're down here, measure 21, 2, 5. Now we're going to change things up. Going to 4, 5. C is 1. A is 6. A minor. We have our 2, 5. Back to 1. And, ooh, stay on C for a minute there. Then we go to 6. Now our measure 45. Back to 2. 5. 1. 6. 2. 5. Yeah, I think I'm saying 2, 2, 5. It's not, it should be 2, 5, 1. But anyway. Okay, this next one is an F. 4. 5. C is 1. A is 6. D minor is 2. G, 5. C, back to 1. We have 1 for that whole measure. And then we get to measure 73. We are back to 4 for the whole measure. Measure 77. I have 1. And then 2, 5. And then we're back to 1. Okay, page 4. You have an F. It's going to be 4. C, 1. D minor is 2. G is 5. C is 1. A minor is 6. D minor is 2. G is 5. C is 1. So let's break this down just a little bit and talk about some of these chord and note relationships, just to point out a couple of things. So I think it's interesting to notice that, sure enough, in the first 8 measures, basically what we have are chord tones taken from the chord, played out in order, and that creates something that is very, very harmonious, that is very, very stable, and is, well, yeah, consonant, very consonant. There's basically no dissonance in this entire song in terms of the larger scale traditional dissonance. Like if you look at the intervals between notes, obviously we don't have any harmonic intervals here, but still a lot of consonants. So we can see in the first 8 measures, sure enough, we have a C chord in measure 1 with 1, 5, 1, then 3, 1, 5. So that's just pulling chord tones out of the chord and using that in the melody. Then in measures 3 and 4, we have 6, 3, 6, 1, 6, 3. But here's the thing, if we kind of change our perspective, when we think about those notes in relation to the chord, that A would actually be 1 in relation to the A minor. The E would be 5, A would be 1, C would be 3, A would be 1, E would be 5. So we can see that even there, even though we're thinking about those notes as if they were part of the C major scale, which they are, you could also think about them relating to the chord, in which case it would be just chord tones from the A minor chord. In the measures 5 and 6, under the D minor, we have 2, 6, 1, 5, 1, 6, which interestingly is a lot of the chord tones from a D minor. So if we think about this in terms of D minor chord tones, we have 1, which would be the D, 5 would be the A, 7 would be the 1, but we're not going to worry about 7s till theory 2, and then on the weakest beat of measure 6, on beat 3, we have 5 again. And then breaking down measures 7 and 8, we have a G major chord, and the melody is going 5, 5, 2, 4, 5. But if we think about that from a G perspective, a G chord tone perspective, the notes that are in the G chord, we would say 1, 1, 5, 7, 1. So a lot of chord tones, and very interesting to see those chord tones come out of the chords and be used for this arpeggio. Arpeggio is the word when you take tones and you play them all in a row in ascending or descending order. There's a little bonus for you. And then you can go through and do the same sort of thinking along with the rest of the melody and really break it down and think about it from a perspective of, okay, what are the chords? What are the notes from the scale being used? Look at the chord progressions. Start to make those connections and start to burn that stuff into your brain. And I'll see you in the next boss fight. In this boss fight, we're going to be taking on the Green Hill Zone 1 from Sonic the Hedgehog. So first thing for us to do is to look at our key signature. No sharps, no flats. That means it's either going to be C major or A minor. Now let's take a peek at the chords. Well, we have a C for the first 4, 8, 12, 16 measures before we get to an F in measure 17. Okay, so that's a lot of C at the beginning, and we can see at the end, sure enough, we're ending on a C chord. On top of that, let's see, I don't even think there's a single A minor. There is not a single A minor chord in this entire piece of music. So sure, there's E minor chords, but we know this can't possibly be the key for E minor because there's no sharps, no flats. It has to be either C major or E minor, and there's no A minor chords in this whole thing, and we start and end on a C major chord. So just based off the key signature and the chords, we can say with a very high degree of confidence that this is going to be in the key of C major. And sure, if we look at the notes in the first 8 measures, there really isn't a lot in the way of common notes, but remember, a lot of times when we have modern music, you're going to have to do a balancing act between looking at the common notes, looking at the key signature, and looking at the chords. And here, we're not really going to pay attention to the notes in the first 8 measures to tell us what the key is because, well, they're just not simply hitting those common notes. Let's look at the last couple measures. Yeah, and even here in the last couple measures, yeah, a couple common notes, but really not much in the way of driving that home. You can see in measure 45, 6, 7, 8, well, starting in measure 45, measure 47, we can see that, sure, we have a G on the weakest beat that ties into the strongest beat in measure 48, and then we have a couple scale degree ones, but still you can see that the scale degrees are really not contributing to tell us the key that this is in, but from the key signature and the chords, we have a high degree of confidence that it is in the key of C, and sure enough, it is in the key of C major. So let's start off by doing a scale degree analysis. So we're going to do scale degree, and then we're going to write C. There you go. All right, so first up we have 7. Then we have 6, back to 7, 6, 7, 6. So already right there, that's kind of an interesting conversation to have because you look at the arrangements we've gone through, you look at the songs we've gone through already, and we've not really seen a major chord with just 7s and 6s. A major chord also, the major chord that is the 1, or the major chord built off the tonic of the key that we're in, or tonic of the scale of the key that we're in, so C being 1, with all these 7s and 6s on it. So already right here, we're actually seeing something pretty interesting that we've not seen so far, that there's no scale degree 1, there's no scale degree 5, no scale degree 3, which hanging out on 7 and 6, which does create a very interesting sonic effect. If you'll forgive the pun, which was unintentional, but we found our way there, of those 6s and 7s. So maybe go listen to this a couple times too. And then sure enough here, finally we have a scale degree 1 in measure 5, but then we're back to 7 and 6. And then we have, again, a whole bunch is starting in measure 9, 6, 7, yeah, okay, some ones, 6, 7, 1, 1, 7. Now, if you made the mistake of thinking that this piece of music was in the key of A minor, I understand why. Because if we look at these first 14 measures, well, there's a lot of A's and B's and C's. And if you're thinking about this from an A minor common notes perspective, A being 1, C being flat 3, there's a lot of A minor common notes here. But it's not A minor, it's in C major. So, carrying on. Measure 18. 1, 6, 1, 7. I know my 7s and my 1s are looking kind of similar. There we go. How about that? 1, 7, 5. 5 is tied to another 5. 3, 2, 1, 7, 1. Let's do that with our 7s, just to be clear. 7, 5 tied to the next page. Look out. Page 2. And sure enough, here we have 1, 6, 1, 7, 1, 7, 5, 6, 6, 4, 6, 5, 6, 5, 1. Hey there, 1. All right, measure 33. We're tied in from the last one, so no need to write anything there. Actually, you can see that. 1, 6, 1, 7, 1, 7, 5, tied, 5, 3, 2, 1, 7, 1, 7, 5, tied, 1, 6, 1, 7, 1, 7, 5. All right, bring us on home. 6, 6, 4, 6, 5, 6, 5, 1, 1, 3. Oops, I almost wrote that as a 2. And that's why, it's because the next one was a 2. All right, let's go back and do the Roman numerals. So first we write our key. Then we're going to write our first Roman numeral, Roman numeral 1 for C. And then there are no chords until we get to measure 17, which is an F. Then we're going to write our 4. And then in measure 19, we have an E minor, which is going to be our 3. There you go. Then we're back to F, which is 4. And then E minor, which is 3. F is 4. E minor, which is 3. Also interesting to notice here that going between the F and the E minor, this sort of 4-3 thing, there's a lot of interesting uses of chords and melodies in this piece of music just from a theory perspective, just to think about that in those first measures using 6 and 7 so much over the 1 chord. And then here just going back and forth between 4 and 3 so much. It also just creates interesting things because this is not stuff you see every day. The next one is D minor, which is going to be 2. have C, which is 1, F, which is 4. Let me guess. Sure enough, E minor, which is 3. Then we're going to do the 4 to 3 again. 4, 3. Ooh, 4 again. To 3. Again, you can make your writing much neater than mine. D is 2. C is 1. And then we end with a good old 5, 1. So final comments on this one is that really interesting uses of the chord, well, not necessarily progression, but sure, the chord progression of 4, 3, 4, 3, going between that F and that E minor. That's something interesting, not something you see every day. Also, the melody, using those notes 6 and 7 from the major scale over that one chord, very interesting as well. I will see you in the next boss fight. Here's one of my favorite pieces of video game music, the Overworld theme from Super Mario. From the SNES, going all the way back there. This is the piece of music that plays when you get on Yoshi. I think it might also play in some other places in those first couple of levels. So, Overworld theme. First thing for us to figure out is the key of the music. So let's look at our key signature. No sharps, no flats. That means we're dealing with either C major or A minor. Okay, let's start by looking at our chords. All right, we got a bunch of C, F, C, G, C, F, and 2, 5, 1 to C. If we're in C, F, D minor. Well, not a single A minor chord in this whole thing. How about that? There's not a single A minor chord, and we start and end with a C major chord. Let's imagine for a second that we're totally wrong and it's not C. Let's think about these scale degrees from an A minor perspective. So we would start on 5, then we'd go to 3. Oh, and then we'd be on 1. Okay. Oh, the scale degrees actually make a rather a strong case for the minor. But before you even look at the scale degrees, we don't start and end on scale degree 1. We start on scale degree 3, we end on scale degree 1. However, starting and ending on that C chord, highly unlikely you're going to be in the key of A minor if you start and end on a C chord. Now, like I was talking about before, you can see that there is rather a decent case just from a scale degree perspective. If we don't look at the chords and we just talk about the scale degrees, sure, the first 4 measures, there are A's, there are C's, there are E's, which are all our common notes from an A natural minor scale. However, if we look at the last couple of measures, yeah, okay, we still have some A's and things. So it's interesting. Make sure that when you're thinking about determining the key, you're taking the chord plus melody into consideration for some more modern music where it's not always going to be completely straightforward and the melody is not always going to be just hitting home on the common notes for major keys on major scales. So let's start by doing our scale degree analysis. Do scale degree, key of C major, and we start on scale degree 3. Then we have scale degree 1, scale degree 5. Then we have 6, 1, 1. Ooh, don't forget about that 6 at the end there. Very good. I'm going to zoom out so we can just go through line by line. 5, 1, 1, 5, 3, 2, 5. By the way, if you're wondering how I'm doing this fast, just calling out the scale degrees, it's because, well, I know all the notes of a C major scale, and I have that memorized. Because I have it memorized, I can go rather expediently. In fact, the thing that's slowing me down is having to handwrite it. And you can do that too. There's nothing special about me and my music theory, knowledge or understanding. I just took the time to memorize it. So if you take the time to memorize it, you can do it too. There's nothing mysterious about it. It just takes a little bit of work. Okay, here we are in 17. 5, 3, 1. Okay, here's where things get interesting. So remember our rules from scale degree analysis. If any note is changed from the major scale and brought down a half step, we're always going to put a flat in front of it. So right here we have the flat in front of the E, so we're actually going to have flat 3. Whoa, interesting. 1, 5, and here it is again. Flat 3, 2. All right, that was really cool. Measure 25. Regular 3. 1. Well, right, not that a 3 without a flat is regular, but regular for the key. 5. Regular for the scale. 3. 1. Oh, here we are again. Very interesting. With a flat 3. 1. 5. To 5. Fascinating. Love that use of the flat 3 there. Then we have C on 3, just like we did at the beginning. 1, 5. So what you can think about too is if you're planning on writing your own music, and even if you're not planning on writing your own music, just analyzing this, how fascinating it is to have this song that is just so major. It's like C major chords everywhere. The melody is major. There's like not even a single A minor chord in this whole thing. However, the composer is bringing in and borrowing notes that are outside of the major scale. How fascinating is that? And that's something it's totally cool to do. Now, you're not going to see a whole lot of that in level 1 because we like to keep it easy for you and not throw really crazy stuff your way, but you're going to start to see more and more of composers doing things like that, not just staying in the major scale the whole time. And part of the reason for that is because it creates more textures, more flavors. There's more options available to someone when they start borrowing outside of all the notes from the scale. Well, let's do our Roman numerals. I'm going to write our key. 1, 4. Don't, but do go. But don't bum bum bum. Bum bum. Grum bum. 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 Bum bum bum. Bum. D minor. Dom bum. Bum bum bum. To our C. 1. F. Da. C. Da. Da. That's our minor third. Da ba doom. Ga ba 5. Let's fix that too. Back to 4. Stam bum. Bum to 1. Bum bum. Stam gum dum bum. It's gonna be our melody there. 5. Sugary doogady. Dum bum. Bum. Bum bum bum. Bum. Bum bum bum. 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 Bum 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 bum. Bum. Bum bum bum. Bum. Excellent. So, interesting to see in this one the use of the flat 3. Wild. Over these chords that, well, normally you wouldn't see the flat 3 happening, but it creates a feeling, it creates a vibe, it gives a sound, it communicates emotion, it has this playfulness to it, but also the threat of failure, because even though that game and all games for the most part are very fun, there is always that threat of failure. So I think it's interesting to think about that flat 3 as creating this playfulness, but also implying a challenge, something difficult, a little bit of dissonance, something challenging within all the rest of the consonants or the fun. I will see you in the next boss fight. In this boss fight, we're going to be breaking down and understanding Confronting Myself from the game Celeste. Now, we're not going to be doing the whole song, we're going to be doing part of the song, which is going to be the synth solo from 28 seconds to 59 seconds. If you want to go listen to the recording so you can hear the exact part of the song that we're going to be breaking down. So first thing for us to do is to figure out the key signature. Now we can see the key signature, no sharps, no flats, which means we either have C major or A minor. So now we need to figure out which is going to be which. Start off by looking at the chords. Well, our first chord is an A minor, and we don't have anything till measure 10, when we have a G, then we're back to A minor, okay. Then we have a G, then we have an A minor, then we have a G, then we have an A minor, then we have a G, and then we end on an A minor. Well, I'll tell you what, starting and ending on an A minor, there isn't a single C chord in this entire solo. Right there from the key signature in the chords, we can already call it as being A minor. But let's do a quick look at our strongest and strong beats for our first couple of measures. And sure enough, we can see that on our strongest beat, we have an A, which would be scale degree 1. On our strong beat, we have a C, which would be scale degree flat 3. And strong beat right here in measure 3 would be scale degree 5, all three of which are our common notes for minor melodies. So the key is going to be A minor. So let's start off by doing our scale degrees in A minor. So we have scale degree 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And 5 is tied. And then we're back to 1 here, and then 5. Okay, changing here, we have 4, 5, 4, 3, 2. This is measure 10. So in measure 10, we have 4, 5, 4, 3, 2. Now we are in measure 14. 3, 2, 1, 2. 3, 4, 5, 1, 5. Page 2, measure 26. 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 1, 2. Nice long tie. That one's going to be 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24 beats or 24 counts. That sure is a long note. Okay, going to measure 46, where's the rate? 49. We're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 5, tied to measure 58. Oh, and that 5 is going to last us a while. Then we have 1. Ooh. Flat 7. To 6. Now, interestingly enough here, 6, we're not going to put a flat in front of it because there's an F sharp here in front of the F, which means no flat symbol in front of the 6 because we're raising it up 1/2 step from where it would normally be for an A natural minor scale. So let's compare this to the last minor key boss fight we did just in terms of scale degrees, and that was the Halo theme. Interesting that both the Halo theme and this solo also have raised scale degree 6. In the Halo theme, that was raised scale degree 6 in an E natural minor, an E minor key, and here's this scale degree 6 raised in an A minor key. But that's definitely something to think about in terms of both writing music and understanding music, is that clearly we can see that a lot of the time when we have a minor key, there can be raised sixths. So that's an interesting little nugget to carry with you and to think about in terms of how the songs sound, the sonic quality of the pieces of music. All right, let's do our Roman numerals. Here we have 1. Next chord is going to be G, which is going to be 7. Now, something to think about too, and I know this is not in the book, but this is a relevant piece of information, is that when you are in minor keys, a lot of times a common chord progression could be 1, 6, and 7. So minor 1, major 6, major 7. Having those major 6 and major 7s in the minor key, those are relatively common chords to see. And there's a lot of chord progressions that use the minor 1, the major 6, and the major 7. And when I say a lot, I mean a lot. 7, major, at A, 1, 42, 7, 50. So what I'm trying to say is that to use these chords under this solo is actually relatively common. Now, not common in a way that cheapens anything that the composer has done, but just common in the sense that it's something that is done and is used and you can find. And finally with 1. So I think what's interesting with this solo, this synth solo, is to see that there's basically 2 chords the whole way through. It's just alternating between an A minor and a G major. But you see how much is happening on top of those 2 chords. So the lesson we can learn from this song is that there doesn't have to be a lot of chords happening for it to be an interesting piece of music. There really doesn't. You can just have one chord like we had with the Halo theme, and that chord was just implied there. It wasn't even a chord played there. It's just that was the chord that could be heard there if we were to put a chord behind it. But here, you can see that there's really only 2 chords, but with these 2 chords, so much is made. So I think there's really something to be said there as well for creativity, in the sense that, man, you don't need 250 chords to really create an incredible piece of art. You can just do it with 1, or you can do it with 2. I will see you in the next boss fight. Welcome to the Undertale boss fight, where we're going to break down and understand Undertale by Toby Fox. Now, there is a lot of repetition in this song. So what I'll do is I'll analyze and talk about certain pages, then I'll say, okay, and this whole page is just repeated again on the next page. Let's get started with understanding our key signature. So, sure enough, we can see we have no sharps and no flats, which means we either are in the key of C major or A minor. So first thing for us to do is to look at our chords. Now we have a C chord for the first page. There's no other chords on this first page other than a C chord. And then we go to an F. Then we're back to C, F, G. Well, there's an A minor. Measure 61. F, C. Okay, a couple more A minors, some Gs. Yeah, okay. F, G, G, A minor. Okay. F, C, G, A minor. F, G, A minor. F, C, G, A minor. Okay. Well, this one's interesting because our first chord is a C major. Our last chord is in A minor. So I think what is perhaps interesting to unpack here is, well, what do we do in this case? Because we know if it starts and ends on a major chord, well, then obviously it's going to be major. If it starts and ends on a minor chord, well, it's going to be minor. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the beginning and we're going to take a look at the notes in our first couple of measures. Also, when you have one chord for like an entire page plus, that really is also worth something. Like it's just hanging out on a C for a really, really, really long time. That in and of itself is worth something. So even when you're looking at a song and you see that, sure, there's a C that it starts on, there's an A minor it finishes on, that C major hanging out for like 2 pages worth of time, that is worth more than the 4 measures of A minor at the end. Sometimes. Sometimes also having a song end on a minor can be worth more, but in this case, I'm telling you, having that C major at the beginning, that's worth more. Which I guess I essentially just gave it away what key this is in, but we're gonna do it anyway. Okay, so let's look at our first 2 measures. Let's think about this from a major perspective. Okay, so if we were major, this would be 5, 2, 1, 5. Now, if this was an A minor, we would have 7, 4, 3, 7. All right, so based off those notes, we either have 5, 2, 1, 5, or flat 7, 4, flat 3, flat 7. Which do you think is more likely? Well, I'm going to tell you, it's major. Think about it. We only have 1 common note for minor. We have 3 common notes from major. Plus, we have that C major hanging out, taking up like the entire first page. Plus, we don't even get to an A minor chord until measure 63 or 65, whatever it was. So the scale degrees here are actually relatively straightforward. So I'm just going to let you do the scale degrees because there's no surprises throughout this entire piece of music with the scale degrees. So what I want to point out here is actually to talk more about the chords. So what we're going to do first is we're going to go through and do a Roman numeral analysis with the chords, and then I'm going to break down and point some things out about the chords in relationship to the melody. All right, so let's start by putting our key and our Roman numerals. Okay, so we have 1 for days. Okay, then we get to 4. Then we're back to 1, 49, 4, 57. We have G. It's going to be our 5. A minor is going to be 6. Now we have 4. 73 we have 1. 81 we have 4. 89 we have 5. 93 we have 6. And 97 4. 105 we have 1. 113 back to 4. 121 we have 5. Then we have 6. Then we're back to 4. 1. 145. F is 4. 153. G is 5. 157. A minor is 6. 161. F is 4. 169 is 1. 177 is 4. 185 is 5. 189 is 6. 193. Ooh, this is a long song. 193 is 4. I think almost the entire song is in here. One thing to watch out for here in measure 204, look out for that B flat, considering we're in the key of C, that's going to be a flat 7. Keeping it going. 201, 5. 205 is going to be C. 209 is going to be F, which is 4. 217 G. A minor, which is 6. Oops, almost wrote that as 1. F as 4. G is 5. Then we're at C. A minor. F. C. G. And A minor to finish. Okay. Now, let's talk a little bit about the chords and the way the chords are used throughout the song, because this is actually really fascinating and one of the reasons why I wanted to have you do this boss fight in the first place. So this entire song, if you're not familiar with it, pause this video, go listen to it, and then come back. Okay, we're back. We all know what Undertale sounds like. What gets really interesting about this song is the way the chords speed up and get more complex over time. I'll show you what I mean. We start off with the entire first page as Roman numeral 1, as C major. Okay, that's a lot. Okay, 33, we go to F, which is 4. So we have 32 measures where nothing changes about the chords. Now what we're going to see is the chords are going to change every 8 measures. They're going to start to speed up. So we have 8 measures of F. Now we have 8 measures of C. Now we have 8 measures of F. Now we have, getting even faster, 4 measures of G, 4 measures of A minor. So we're starting to speed up. It's starting to become more complex. We go to 65, 8 measures of F, 8 measures of C, 8 measures of F, 4 measures of G, 4 measures of A minor. So we're starting to see a chord progression. And the chord progression we're starting to see is 4, 1, 4, 5, 6. That's the chord progression we're starting to see, and I'll show you why. On the last page, we had the same thing. It was F for 8 measures, that's 4. Then we have C for 8 measures, that's 1, so that's 4, 1. We have F for 8 measures, that's back to 4. Then we go to 5, which is G, and then to 6, which is A minor. So we have 4, 1, 4, 5, 6 as a chord progression, and that is a really cool chord progression. And if you listen to the music, you can hear that chord progression, because it does not start or end on 1, it keeps pushing the music forward. It feels like it doesn't want to end. It feels like it's never finished. It feels like it's never done, almost like the game of Undertale is never done. You can keep on playing it over and over and over again. So that chord progression in and of itself, because there's no resolution, we talked about the consonance and dissonance and how dissonance wants to resolve to consonance in terms of intervals. Well, it's the same thing with chords. Dissonant chords, or just any chord, wants to resolve. And I say wants to resolve. Well, it's an easy way of phrasing a very complicated idea. And that's because in Western music culture, in this European descendant music theory culture, chords want to, or our ears want to hear a resolution to 1. We want to hear chords going back to 1. And when the chords don't start or end on 1, where one's stuck in the middle, like it is here in this chord progression between the two fours, it feels like it never lands, it never stops, it never pauses, it never truly comes home. It's always repeating and it's always launching itself back into something new. Sure enough, we can see in 97, we continue this chord progression of F, C, F, G, A minor. And because this chord progression is here, it just pushes us forward. We never have that resolution starting or ending this chord progression on the 1. We're starting on 4, ending on 6. In 129, the chord progression continues, but here's the thing. There's a new melody here. So we have the same exact chords as we've had for the last 2 or 3 pages. But now what changes is the melody. So I have the same chord progression on 129, this 4, 1, 4, 5, 6. We continue looking at measure 61, this 4, 1, 4, 5, 6. And then we're going to come back through one more time and talk about the melody in relationship to these chords. And then we have this chord progression continuing throughout the rest of the song, this 4, 1, 4, 5, 6. Now, where we can see things change is really right towards the end, where the chords start to speed up even more. The fastest we've seen these chords go so far is 4 measures at a time. Now we're going to see them 2 measures at a time. See this? 2 measures of A minor, 2 measures of G major. Sure, 4 measures here of F, but previously we've been seeing F for 8 measures. So that's speeding it up. G for 4 measures, C for 4 measures, A minor for 4 measures. So we can see here at the end, the chords are almost doubling in speed, because before we've had groups of 4 and 8. Now we're having groups of 2 and 4. And so part of what keeps this song interesting, because it is so repetitive, is the fact that the chords speed up gradually over the course of the song. They start out with an entire page of C, and then it speeds up to groups of 8 and groups of 4, and then by the end we're at groups of 2 and groups of 4. And that idea of speeding the chords up, so how often the chord is changing. So instead of a chord changing every 8 measures and every 4 measures, it's changing every 4 measures and every 2 measures. You'll see that a lot in pop music and other modern music genres to create interest and to create momentum and to give different feelings in different parts of songs. Now let's go take a look at the melody and how that relates to the chords, because it is interesting the way that the melody changes with the chords. So basically, at the beginning, we have this which have this sort of thing here, which, yeah, sure, it's kind of a melody, it's kind of a theme, but it's not really much in the way of a melody. It's more just sort of a pattern to have something interesting start the song off. And we introduce this chord progression, this 4, 1, 4, 5, 6 chord progression, while the melody is going sorry if I'm getting that a little bit wrong, but you get the idea. Then we keep the same chord progression as the melody changes to bum, 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 bum. We can see that that slower melody, that real Undertale leitmotif, if you will, that we heard from the very beginning of the whole game, is now coming back here and is repeated a couple times. Now, it starts to change and it starts to evolve once we get to measure 125, Because we can see in measure 125, we're no longer just keeping this slow melody. We're adding this extra little bum 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 thing in here that we've not had previously, which, along with the chords speeding up, speeds the melody up. So we had this very slow melody. Now we're starting to speed it up with this line. Then we're back to the slow melody a couple more times through. Here's where it gets interesting. Sure enough, we go through it a couple more times. We have this more speedy section here. And now we have another theme or another leitmotif come in from the game. The bomb. That theme right there, we can see, sure enough, bringing in that flat saying, right there, that's where that's happening there. And then, yeah, we come back to our original Undertale leitmotif, but to see that both the chords and the melody start off, well, slower, and then each in their own way speed up. That really creates dynamics and interest between the chords and the melody and also over the course of the song. And what's so valuable about doing this type of analysis is we wouldn't be able to see these connections as clearly. We wouldn't be able to draw the lines of connection as clearly if we didn't go through the scale degrees for the melody, if we didn't go through understanding the chord progression and how the chord progression doesn't leave us anywhere to really rest. It always pushes us forward. I will see you in the next boss fight. In this boss fight, we're going to tackle Heartache from the game Undertale by Toby Fox. Now, we're going to see actually some similarities to the song Undertale from Undertale that we did in the last boss fight, in the sense that the chord progression is not going to sit in one place. It wants to keep pushing us forward and all sorts of cool things that I'm not going to give away yet. So let's go jump in and check things out. All right, first thing for us to do is to look at our key signature. So we have 1 sharp in the key signature, which means we are either going to be in the key of G major or the key of E minor. Now we need to figure out which one that's going to be. Let's start by taking a look at the chords. We have C major as the first chord, which is interesting because even if it's in G major or if it's in E minor, to start on a C is pretty interesting. That's if we're in G major, we're starting on 4. If we're in E minor, starting on 6. Now remember, we did talk about a couple of boss fights ago that common chord progression of minor 1 to 6 and to 7 in a minor key. So perhaps we're going to see clues for that. And sure enough, as we go down, we see we have our first 3 chords are C, E minor, and D. So if E minor is indeed 1, then C is 6, D is 7. Okay, more C's, more E minors, more D's. C's, D's, E minors, C's, E minors, D's, C's, a B minor, changing things up. D, C, D, E minor, an A minor, a B minor, C, D, E minor, D, C, D, E minor. Okay, the last chord is an E minor. The first chord's a C, but we didn't have a single G major chord in this whole song. So that right there should tell you all you need to know. There's no way this song is going to be in the key of G major if there is no G major chord. It just is not going to happen. It just, for modern pop music, and this is not pop music, but it's like pop music inspired, pop music adjacent, if you will. And I know Toby Fox was inspired by other things, so I get it. But point is, in this modern music thing, if you don't have a G major chord, very, very unlikely the key is going to be in G major. Like, so unlikely, like 99.9 recurring percent. Like, like tons of there's a decimal point, tons of zeros, and all the way off in the distance there's like a little 1% chance that it would be in the key of G major. So already right there off the chords, we see there's no G chord in the whole thing. There's a ton of E minors. And also if we look at our notes on our strong beats, just in our first 4 measures, strongest beat, measure 1 is E. Then we have G, E, E. So already right there, our strongest beats, we have 1 and flat 3, if thinking about it from a minor common notes perspective. So we're going to go with E minor as the key. So we're going to start with scale degrees. Put scale degrees, E minor, put a little colon. Start with 1, 3, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, 7 to 5. Let's see. The next line is exactly the same notes, but with a different chord. I'm not going to write the scale degrees down there. I'm just going to move forward. We go to measure 9, where we have 4, 2, 1, 7, 6, 5, 7. So notice here we don't have the raised sixth. We do indeed have the flat sixth from the E natural minor scale. So whereas we saw the raised sixth both in Halo and in the Celeste synth solo, here we have the lowered sixth. All right, let's keep it going. Measure 13. 1, 1, 1, 1. And then we have a repeat of our first line. And we have some new notes here. Flat 3. So just to be clear, measure 17, this whole line right here is the same exact notes as our first line up here. Yeah, same notes. 3. Again, we have a flat 3. Once more, flat 3. Bunch of flat 3s. All right, now here's one of the really cool things about doing analysis is we really start to see these patterns. Look how we have the same, well, similar here. These two measures have the same rhythm. Well, these 4 measures have the same rhythm. So this rhythm here is the same as this rhythm here. This rhythm here is the same as this rhythm here. But we have scale degree 1 in measure 13 and 14, and scale degree flat 3 in measures 21 and 22. So an interesting rhythmic connection there between those two. And yeah, so that's a rhythmic, well, we can also see the same rhythm up here in measure 9. We're actually also going to see that same rhythm here on the next page in measure 25. So I think what's interesting to notice, and this is great from both a analytical perspective and also if you're thinking about writing your own music, is using not just the same series of notes, but using the same rhythm, but changing the notes within the rhythm. So let's get back to our scale degrees here. So that's scale degree 2, because we are indeed in E minor. Then to 1, then we have flat 7, 6, scale degree 6, scale degree 5, scale degree 7. Scale degree 1 in measure 29, 5, flat 7, 1, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1. And you can see we have the same rhythmic pattern here as we do here, different notes. It's interesting to see that one of the things that makes Toby Fox's music so memorable is the way he keeps it simple, in the sense that the same note patterns could be repeated or the same rhythm patterns are repeated. That's also what helps your brain to identify and remember things, is when there's repetition. Because think about remembering anything. The way you remember anything is through repetition, like the way you memorize anything or the way you commit anything to memory. Well, now I'm saying the same thing twice, but it's through repetition. All right, so let's look at we have 1, flat 3, 2, flat 3, 1, 1, 2, flat 3, 7, 5. We're going to have that melody repeated a whole bunch of times down here. See? Same melody over and over again, but with slight differences in the chords that are being used under the melody. And after that, this line right here, sure enough, we have that repeated, I do believe, right here. Yep, that's right. So measure 57, that line is exactly the same as the line of measure 9. Both circled in red there for you. Same. And then we're back to the same notes 2 times through our main, well, literally a motif, literally a theme here we can see repeated. It's the same series of notes here. See this series of notes right here? It's the same thing we have here and here. Okay, now changing things up a little bit. So we're actually going to write these scale degrees down. Now, in your music, you most likely actually went through and wrote all the scale degrees out. That's great. That's fine. I'm just saving a little bit of time so you don't have to just sit here and watch me write the scale degrees in. So I'll just point out when we have things that are the same. And then also, you end up making more of a connection, because then instead of me just sitting here writing scale degrees, we actually talk about the way the things are similar and how they show up over and over again in different ways. Yeah, I think we've seen this one before, but let's do it again anyway. I didn't do many in A minor before I did this. Okay. Then we're at 7. That's hilarious. 6 to 5 to 7. That'll teach me to try and film all of these in one day. Okay. Flat 7. I have 1, flat 3, 4, flat 3, 2. We've already had this measure as well. Flat 3. That little line can go. And then in this last line of this page, we just have scale degree 1 hanging out for a whole bunch of time. All right, measure 89, 90, 91. 5, 1, 3, 5 up the octave. 3, 4, 5, 4, 3. That's a very squiggly 3. I'm going to fix that just for clarity. There we go. Whoops. To 4, to 2, 7, then to 1. Then we have our little group of notes here repeated a whole bunch of times from the very beginning. Yep, same thing. So measure 109 through 117, 18, 19, 20. It's all the same thing. We've also seen this before on our last page. So fairly straightforward in terms of the scale degrees. Now, let's go back to the top, or the beginning rather. So musicians, we say the top would be the beginning. And let's do our Roman numeral analysis. So we're going to start off by putting our key, E minor. All right, so what's interesting is that instead of starting on 1, we're actually starting on 6, which is fascinating, but not completely uncommon in terms of having the common uses of 6, 7, and 1 in terms of chords for minor songs. Chord progression you can hear throughout the world in video game music, sure, but it more started in the rock world in late 60s, early 70s, but then is still around to this day. It's one of the coolest chord progressions where you have, we're in the key of E minor, do E minor, you have E minor, D, C, D. You can do any combination of that. It's like just trying to get to that E minor in any combination. All right, so here's our C. Sorry. 6, and I say flat 6 because from a scale degree perspective we'd have the flat. When we talk about the chords we don't actually put the flats. Okay, measure 21, 2 measures per chord. Interesting there. 5, we're back to 6. Then we hang out on 6 for a while. Then we're on 7. Then we're back to a 1. And then guess where we go? Sure enough, it's going to be 6. And then 53, we are back to 1. And then 7 is D. And C is 6. And now here's interesting. B minor, we get 5, a minor 5. So then we have D, which is 7. Then we have C, which is 6. And then we're back to D, which is 7. Then E minor down at the bottom, which is 1. All right, page 4. Now this is exciting. This is the first time we've gone to minor 4. Interesting that we have a minor 4 on page 4. There's no connection there because it just happens to be page 4 in the way that I wrote it out. Here's B minor. That's going to be 5. 6 is D. 6 is C, excuse me. 7 is D. Back to 6, which is C. Then we have E minor at the end of the page. And then last page, we have 7. Then we have 6. Then we have 7. And then we resolve to 1. So, all in all, nothing crazy out of the ordinary in terms of, well, notes that don't come from the scale or chords that don't come from the scale, but a very interesting case to understand and see how with the 3 chords of E minor, D, and C, or 1, 7, and 6, you can really create a lot. And there's only a couple times throughout this whole song that Toby Fox actually went to 5 or to 4. The rest of the song was just 1, minor 1, 7, and 6, both major. And you can hear that 1, 7, 6. I mean, Ziggy Stardust, the sort of bridge section, has that chord progression. All along the Watchtower version played by Jimi Hendrix has that chord progression. I mean, so many songs that I can't even remember them have that chord progression. Kryptonite by 3 Doors Down, that's a deep cut. But tons and tons of songs have chord progressions built out of minor 1, 7, and 6. I will see you in the next boss fight. In this boss fight, we're going to break down Sweden from Minecraft. Now, this is truly a beautiful piece of music, and so I'm really excited to have this here for you to understand and break down in this boss fight. So let's start off as we always do by checking out the key signature. We have 1 sharp, which means we're either going to be in G major or E minor. Now we need to figure out which that's going to be by looking at chords and common notes from the melody, and then also sometimes chords and common notes together. Okay, so even just looking at this first page, we can see that there is a chord progression, and the chord progression is going A minor G, B minor D. We see that's repeated over and over again. We have A minor G, B minor D, A minor G, B minor D, A minor G, B minor D. This whole first page. And it actually, well, it continues on for the whole next page as well. And, well, the page after that. And, golly, wouldn't you know it, the page after that. So we can see that this entire song is built on a chord progression. The chord progression is going A minor G, B minor D. So we know there are no E minor chords in this entire song, which means we know pretty much 99.99 recurring percent chance that this song is not going to be in the key of E minor. It's going to be in the key of G. But here's where things get really interesting. And that is, this whole song doesn't act like it's in the key of G. Like, let's look at the first notes. We have A, B, C, E. Then we have D, C, and then finally a G. But that's only one G. Sure, we have the B, which is a common note for 3. Sure, we have the D, which is a common note for 5. But the way the chord progression is acting too, we talked about this type of chord progression with Undertale by Toby Fox, in the sense that because the chord progression didn't start or end with 1, it never feels like the chord progression comes to rest. We can actually see the same thing here because G is literally the second chord. And if we think about it, if we zoom out and we imagine sort of a strongest, weak, strong, weakest type of thing for 4/4, and we apply that to a way of thinking of chord progressions, which you don't always do, but I think it works here. We can think of A minor being the first chord getting the strongest. We can think of G as being kind of weak. It's not really in an important place. It's the second chord in the chord progression. B minor being strong, and then D being significant in the sense that it's going to launch us back to something. But it's also the weakest, but it launches us back in the same way that the weakest beat of 4/4, beat 4 launches us back into beat 1 of the next measure. So this chord progression doesn't give us a feeling of stopping and of waiting and of resolution and of support. There's no home. Because the chord progression is like this, just like from Undertale, it's always going to push us to go to the next measure and never really stop and pause and feel like we've made it there. And you can tell the way Undertale just kind of builds and keeps on going is the same way this song builds and keeps on going. And that's because of the way the chords are arranged. It keeps us feeling like we've never quite made it home, and we always have to keep on walking. We need to keep on moving. On top of that, because the way this chord progression is laid out and the way the notes are laid out and the way the recording sounds, if you actually go listen to the recording, there are some interesting things where, and this is relatively advanced theory, I don't think we're going to get to it till like theory 4 or theory 3 perhaps, is that we can look at major scales from different perspectives and break them down into things called modes. Now, you don't need to understand modes for breaking this down, but just so you understand that really the way this song is being presented is in a mode. It doesn't really feel like it's in G major proper. And what we mean by mode is we take all the notes of a G major scale and we emphasize them differently, just like the relationship between G to E natural minor. You start on scale degree 6 and it's all the same notes. Like, for example, a mode would be starting on scale degree 2 using all the notes of a G major scale, which would be A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, A, and have that be sort of a scale in and of itself. So it's like an A natural minor, but with the raised 6th to an F sharp there, and we'd call that the Dorian mode. So all that to say that we're going to analyze this from the perspective of G major, because that's how we're going to make sense of it right now. But ultimately, in a very advanced way, you could think of this song as actually having not to do directly with the G major or directly with the E minor, but something in between, a mode, using the same notes as a G major scale, but with a different emphasis to give it a different flavor and a different sound. So with no further ado, let's go ahead and jump into our scale degree analysis. Scale degree. We're going to do this as, we're going to do this as G major. I'm going to start off with 2, 3, 4. And the melody here is just that bass line that starts off the song. If you're familiar with it, you can also look down in this lesson in the topic. There are YouTube videos there. You can listen to it. And this will give you some idea of what's happening here. We're just using the bass line that is played. One more point on the chords and the scales and the notes here is, like, you can see too, one of the things that makes this whole song sound unsettled and sound like it's in a mode and not in the major key is because look at the notes that are being used over the chords. So over the chord G, we have C and E, which if we think of G as 1 and we think of the chord tones of G being the root, B being the 3rd, D being the 5th, we have the 4th and the 6th of the chord. So just like we talked about in the sonic green hill zone, using scale degree 7 and scale degree 6 over that major chord gave us a different feeling that's not typical, because we're using scale degree 4 and scale degree 6 over this G major. That also is going to give us a atypical, if you will, feeling. And then to have this B minor, and sure, we have the D there, which is the 3rd of B minor, but then we have the C, which is like the 2nd. If we think of B minor as being 1, C would be 2. Not only that, it's a minor 2nd away from B to C because they're neighbors on the full musical alphabet. Having that C play over the B minor, very interesting choice. And then finally, it's like the melody resolves to a G here, because we're in the, like, thinking about it as the key of G. The melody resolves to scale degree 1 here. However, there's a D chord here, and G, D, E, F sharp, G. G is like the 4th of D. So it's like there's no rest. Here's the G. Here's the D chord. Like, it's not sitting together. There's no rest. There's no resolution. That G stops that D chord from feeling like home because, well, it's not a chord tone, and it's pulling against those chord tones in a very interesting way. And more on melody and chord tones, non-chord tones, neighbor tones, all that good stuff in Theory 3 when we actually go through how to write melodies. But learn about it now, because setting that foundation is great. So we actually go through the same series of notes 3 times on this page with the same chords. There you go. Now here's where things start to change. Things start to change in measure 25. So it starts off like it did before with 2. But now we're starting to see the actual melody come in. And the way that these notes of the melody are presented is every once in a while we'll have one of the bass notes fill in for the melody. So we have a combination of the actual melody that's being played in the right hand of the piano. Then every once in a while we'll have a little bass note fill in the melody because it kind of sounds good in the way the bass works. The bass line works in this song. And when I say bass line, I mean that's what the low instrument's playing. The way it works is it kind of acts sort of a little bit like the melody when the melody's not playing. So that's why we're going to have those notes in there as well. Okay, now we're talking about this as if it's in the key of G. So we're going to have 5, 6, 3, 1, 2 tied to the next measure. We have 3, 5, 2, 2, 1, 6, 5. Kind of looks like a 3, doesn't it? Let's make that clear. 5. Now that looks like a 3 that's having a really bad day. Okay, next one we have actual 3. Then we have 1, 2, 2 again, 5, 3, 2, D being 5, 6, 1. Oh, look at that. How's that? Every once in a while we get a resolution like this. We have scale degree 1 over G. We actually have the root note of the chord in the melody. Scale degree 3, scale degree 2, jumping down to scale degree 7, then 1, then 7, just to tell the difference between the 1 and the 7, then 5, and 5, that D, that's showing us the root of the D chord. So one of the ways that this piece is also interesting is that at the beginning we have all those non-chord tones holding those melody, well, not the melody, but those bass notes underneath the chords. Now here we can see we're starting to get some resolution. We're getting some times where the melody is actually playing chord tones on the chords. Now to be clear, a melody doesn't have to always play chord tones over chords, and it's not like better or worse. It's just different and creates different effects. 2, 5, 3, 2, 2, 5, 6, 1, 3, 2, 7, 1, 7, 5. Here we are on measure 61. 2, 6, 5, 3, 1, 2. Whoa, going down for that 7 there. 3, 5, 2, hanging out on 2. And again here, look, we have 2. We have an A over this G, and the A is just hanging out. This non-chord tone. So chord tones would be G, B, and D, 1, 3, and 5. The third, the root, and the fifth. B has the 2, 3, 6, 3. We have 1, 2. 2 and 6. That's measure 73, 6. Measure 74. 5, 6, 3. We have a 1, a 2. Interesting, you can see that in the previous measure, we had 1 and 2, but an octave down. See, these are things you start to notice when you actually analyze a piece of music that you wouldn't otherwise. Like, how interesting is that? Oh, so cool. Love those connections. Okay, measure 77. scale degree 7. We have 3, 5, 2. Then a bunch of rests. 6, 5, 6 up the octave. 3. Oh! Oh my gosh, guys. Okay, 1, 2. Look at this. Look at this. We have 1 and 2, G3 to A3. Then we have 1, 2, G4 to A4. Then down here we have 1, 2, G5 to A5. How cool is that? So every time it does 1, 2 here at the end of the measure, it's actually going up an octave. So cool. All right. Measure 85. We have scale degree 7, scale degree 3, degree 5, scale degree 2. And now we're on to page 4. Starting in measure 89. 2, 1, 6, 5, 3. Now here's our 1, 2 back down to the G3 to A3. 1, 2, 7. Then 6, 5. 2. 2 again. So a lot of times when we have this 2 on the A minor, like this, that is really taking from the bass note that is being played at that moment. Okay, then we have 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 5, 3. Measure 101. 7 up the octave. 6, 1, 7, 5, 3, 1, 6. Oops, can't see that. There you go. 5, 1, 2, 3, 5. Measure 109. We have 3, 1, 3, 5, 2. Then we have 6, 5, 3, 1, 3, 3, 5. Last page, measure 121. We have 2. Now we're just back to our baseline here. Okay, so all this we've done. So because the chord progression remains the same, what we're going to do is we're going to analyze the chord progression once at the beginning, and then we're going to go through and look at how the melody changes and moves throughout this piece. Okay, so chord progression, G, and you can go ahead and write these Roman numerals throughout the entire piece of music. I'm just going to write them one time to save us both sometimes. I'm sure you actually want to get to the good stuff, and you don't just want to watch me write Roman numerals. So we're going to call this 2. I'm going to call this 1. So A minor is 2, G is 1, B is 3, and D is 5. Okay, let's talk about some connections and actually look at this melody a little bit. So sure, the first page, basically we just have this bass line, which we already talked about, how it's sitting against the chords in a very interesting way. And then the melody starts to come in and starts to speed things up. And I think what's interesting to notice is we're going to talk a little bit about octave registers here with this melody, as we already started to do as we were doing this scale degree analysis. So we can just see, sort of scanning through page 2 that all the notes, nothing really is going up past a C5. In fact, I don't even think I see a B4. Oh yeah, sure, there's a B4 right here. So the highest note really, from what I can see, perhaps I'm missing it. No, I don't think I am. Yeah, highest note here is B4. And on the next page again, we start off with the highest note being a B4. In fact, we don't even have a B4. In fact, the highest note up until, let's see, measure 74 is going to be a G4. Now, what happens in measure 74 is something very interesting. For the first time in the whole entire piece, we have a D5 and an E5. So we're actually moving into a new octave register, because remember, the octave register numbers change on 6. So it's interesting to see that in the same way we talked about Toby Fox bringing interest with chords changing faster, melody changing faster, we can see here C418 is bringing interest with the octave registers of the melody changing over time. So for the first 73 measures of this entire piece, no note goes above a B4. Then in measure 74, all of a sudden we have these notes that are higher and going up into 5. And once we break that barrier, once we go past 5, sure enough, we can see, we have D5, E5, D5 again in measure 78. In measure 82, we have E5, and then we really start cooking up a storm in measure 84, where we have that G5 and the A5. F sharp 5 there in 85. So once C418 has brought the melody up into that higher octave register, the melody is playing with those notes as well as the lower notes that came before. So very interesting to see, both from an analytical perspective and also if you're thinking about writing your own music. Think about that as a technique to use, like, oh, I can keep low notes and then I bring my notes higher to create interest, to create something new happening, because it's the same chords over and over again, it's the same chord progression. So you need to do something interesting with the melody to keep things going. And the interesting thing with the melody doesn't have to be that you take the notes higher. Perhaps you could just change the rhythm and use the same notes. But in this case, we can see C418 is using the compositional tool of actually taking the notes higher. And after that, we can see that the notes actually start going back down. So what's interesting to think about here is, I'm going to sketch this out, is that the notes in this piece of music, they start low, and very gradually they get high, and after they start to come back down until they are low again. So if we think about the contour, the shape of the overall melody, we have like low notes, low notes, low notes, higher notes, and then those high notes come back down to low notes. And so when we map out a song and we look at it from this perspective, this is the story of the song. The story of the song is it builds to a climax. There's something exciting that happens towards the end of the song, like 2/3 into it. And if you start looking at a lot of songs, this is how a lot of songs are structured. They build towards a really exciting moment, a final act, a final boss fight. And then after the final boss fight, there's still going to be maybe a couple things left to do. There's still going to be some cutscenes, etc. I mean, to use a video game analogy, or metaphor perhaps, we chill out after that hardest boss fight, after that climactic moment, after that grand finale. Then there's still stuff happening, but it brings us back down. So this entire piece of music goes, whoa, something big, and then very slowly comes back down. And thinking about that both from an analytical and if you plan on writing your own music perspective is very, very interesting. I will see you in the next boss fight. In this boss fight, we're going to break down and understand the song Weight of the World from Nier Automata. This is going to be our first theme we've had so far that's actually going to have lyrics to it. Very cool addition there. So the first thing for us to figure out is the key of the piece of music. Now, straight off the bat, let's see our key signature, no sharps, no flats, which means it's either C major or A minor. Now, let's look at our chord progression. We have A minor to F to C to G, A minor, F to C to G. Okay, so that is our major common chord progression number 3. That's our 6-4-1-5. However, here's where it gets tricky. Sure, we have this chord progression that shows us the song is major. However, if we look at the very end of this piece of music, after Come to Life, that last Come to Life, we have this melody here. Onka, 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 onka. And this melody here, guys, this is showing us that we're starting on an A, ending on an A. And this first chord here, you can't see it because it's written on the line above. This is an A minor. And if you listen to the piece of music, you'll hear it ends on the minor chord. So this is a fascinating, fascinating, fascinating song that is in the key of A minor, even though the chorus reads, it looks like the chorus is in C major. In fact, this song is in A minor, which is really cool. It's not something you see every day, that you have a major chord progression, but really the song's in the minor key. So basically what we did there is we looked at the common chord progression. We said, okay, the common chord progression is major. However, the notes, the melody, the way this is ending, look, it even ends. The last note is on an A. Sure, the last chord is not an A, but that's because we have this chord progression of A minor to F, A minor to F here at the end. And that, for me, that A minor to F, that A minor to F, that's more important because that's like the beginning of the song. That's the end of the song. We have this onka, 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 onka. So we're actually going to make the decision here that the song is not at all in a major key, but rather is very much A minor. So let's go to the beginning and let's do our scale degree analysis. So here we go. Under the first F, let's write our scale degree A minor with a colon. Okay. 2, 3, 3, 2, 3. 7, 7. Two. So what's interesting here is that this melody is reading more like a C major melody, and that's because we're using this C major progression. So that's why this song is really tricky to get a read on what key it's in. It's because, well, it starts and ends like it's in A minor, but sure enough, in the middle, it really looks and sounds like it's in C major. Because it's meaningless right here. This doesn't feel like we're going 7-1-7. It feels like we're going 5-6-5 from the major perspective. But overall, we need to know and keep in mind that the way the song starts and the way the song ends really is minor. Okay, carrying the weight of the world. We have 5, 6, 5, 6, 5. Oh, to 4. Okay. So let's take a look at this melody. The interesting thing to notice here is how we're alternating back and forth between scale degrees that are next to each other in the A natural minor scale, going 2, 3, 3, 2, 3. That's up here. 2, 3, 3, 2, 3. And then we have 2, 3, 3, 2, 3. Then we have 7, 7, 1, 7. Ooh. Then we have 3, 3, 4. Then we have 5, 6, 5, 6, 5, 4, 3, 4. So what we're seeing is part of what makes this song sound like this song, part of what gives the melody its feeling, is that the notes that are being used are next to each other in the scale. Let's keep it going. 3, 2, 2. Now from here, this is actually pretty much a copy of the melody from the first 4, 8, 12, 16 measures. It's pretty much copied all the way up to measure 31, 32, 33. So in 33, something different happens. And here we go. Maybe if I keep believing my dreams is 2, 3 will come. Again, this melody is not acting like a minor melody. To life. It's acting like a major melody. And then come to life. See how it's even ending on that C? But here's the thing. What happens right after we hit that C is we go to A minor. Whoa. So it's basically like, and again, it's like a minor sandwich. Like you have minor before, minor after. It's like the chorus is in major, and we're switching back and forth between the relative minor and relative major, even though, technically speaking, when we zoom out and look at the whole thing, we really are in A minor for the whole song. Okay, now let's do an analysis for this little 8-measure thing we have here. So we have 1, 5, 4, 7, 5, 5, 4, 7, and then we have a couple different notes. Okay, then we have 1, 5, 4, 1, 5, 5, 4, 1. And then that's repeated again, same chords, same melody on the last page. So let's go back to the top of this and let's take a look at the chords. So again, what's interesting, really, we could think about this chorus as being major. We could think about it as being a 6, 4, 1, 5, and really that's what the chord progression is. So really, we should write 6, 4, 1, 5 for the Roman numerals, but because we know better, we know that the way the song starts and the way the song ends is minor, we're going to give this A minor. I'm going to call this 1. F is going to be 6. C is going to be 3. G is going to be 7. There you go. A, 1, F, 6. C is going to be 3. G is going to be 7. A is going to be 1. F is going to be 6. Come to 1. Life. And then we just go back and forth between 1 and 6, which, as we know, are two common minor chords that you find very often together. Very often you find minor 1, 6, and 7 all together. So all in all, a very, very fascinating piece of music that perhaps we could actually treat as changing between the relative minor and relative major of C major and A minor. However, we're just going to analyze it and think about it as being in the key of A minor. A tricky one for sure, but a lot of fun to sit down and analyze through. I will see you in the next and final boss fight. See you there. In this boss fight, we're going to break down and understand Rivers in the Desert from Persona 5. So, this is another lead sheet song that does indeed have lyrics in it. So, let's get rocking and rolling. So, first, let's look at our key signature. We have 1 sharp on line 5. That means we're either going to be in the key of G major or E minor. So, let's take a look. All right, our first chord is E minor. And, well, that first chord stays our first chord for the first page. And almost half of the second page. So up to measure 36, we've only had an E minor the whole way. So that should be setting off some little bells in your head going, perhaps this song is indeed an E minor. And then we go, sure enough, to 7 with the D, to 4 with the A minor, to 7, 1, 7, 4. Again, I'm using these Roman numerals as if we were in E minor. Okay, yeah, E minor again for a ton of time. Ooh, we get a 6 there with a C, 97. Yep, 4 with A minor. Then back to 1. 7, 1, 7, 1, 7, 4. Yep, 5. No G chords yet, guys. Okay, so not a single G chord in this whole piece of music, and it starts and ends on an E minor chord. So we're going to go check out the melody on page 1, but honestly, just based off of the chords right there in the key signature, there's not a single G chord in the whole tune, or the whole song, I should say. And it starts and ends on an E minor. So that right there already, the chords are speaking volumes. And let's look at the melody for our first 4 measures. And it just so happens that the melody literally, if we were in the key of E minor, is scale degree 1. It's now or it's never, and I've got to make. Then my is scale degree 5. D is scale degree flat 3. So, and then in the 8th measure, we have an A to an E, which, okay. Sure, you could say, well, there's an A there, but still that's not making a stronger case for G, and then the A goes right back to E for the 1. So, yeah, it's now or it's never, and I've got to make my decision. This is definitely an E minor based off of number 1, the chords. But then number 2, then the melody as well, showing that it's like scale degree 1 for the first 6 measures. And then we have other common notes for minor melodies. We have 5, we have 3. So, yeah, undeniably in E minor. So we're going to go ahead and treat this like it is E minor. Let's start with our scale degrees. Okay, and scale degree 1 this whole way through. So I'm not just going to go through and write 1s over and over again. Jump to where we actually have new notes. 5, 3. And the reason why I'm not writing that over and over again is because we'd be here all day. When you do analyses, make sure you do write down all the scale degrees because you want to be able to see it from a bird's eye view and really understand everything that's going on. But for our time here, I'm sure there's other things you would prefer to do other than just watch me write scale degree 1 a couple dozen times. Okay, let's go to a chance to fulfill my mission. A chance to fulfill my mission. Ooh, tied. So already right here, we can see that this entire melody for the first page literally is 1 flat 3, 4, 5. It's the entire melody. There's 1 flat 3, 4, 5. Okay, and now let's head into the chorus. Now we can see already that the chorus is jumping up an octave from where we were. So if we look here at the melody, it's now or it's never, we're on E4, and we can see that immediately for the chorus, we jump up to E5, where we're going to be doing everything an octave higher. And this is actually similar to what C418 used to keep the interest going in Sweden, is that change of how high or how low the notes are creates a lot of change in the music when we listen to it. A river in a, first time we've had scale degree 2 also in this song. Dry land. The last ace in a. Okay, so then the melody's actually repeating, but with changing words. So we can see that the melody that we have here, measure 30 to 36. This melody right here is actually repeating 3 times with the same exact notes in the same exact order, just with different words. That's repeating again. Oasis in a singed land. So interesting there that this chorus, this first chorus that we're hearing, because the second chorus gets a little bit more involved. But this first chorus here, it just repeats the same notes 4 times with the same rhythm, just changing the words. Now, that's not bad. I'm not saying that that's lazy or less than. It's just an interesting thing to point out and to notice that part of what makes this song is the same notes and the same rhythm, just with different words put underneath for that chorus. Now, speaking of repeated notes, I'm keeping the balance, but I'm standing on razor's edge now. These are the same notes and the same rhythms as we had from verse 1, from the first time we saw this, all the way back in, there you go, measure 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We can actually see we're back to the same exact 8 measures of notes here. Move quick or my life is over. There, the same exact notes as the next 8 measures. 1 strike just to faint, then I'm out of his field of vision. Same exact notes. And then we have the same exact notes again. Don't ask why I'm ready, but I'm ready to strike him down now. A chance at a new start. There's no time for indecision. Very cool. Basically the same exact thing is what we had before we went into the last chorus. You can see that these notes right here, indecision, basically the same. You can even see it's rhyming. My mission, indecision, same exact notes. So basically what we have is we have almost, well, we do literally have a copy paste of the notes and rhythms, both happening in the verses where the story is being told, and then also in the chorus. The chorus is the repeated part. So I think that that's interesting, but we're going to explore how the chords change the second time through that copy-pasted first part, which is going to be really interesting on our next pass through. Then in measure 126, we have a river and a dry land. Same exact notes, same words, same rhythm as the last time we saw this. The last ace in a lost hand, same notes. Now, here's where things start to change. When the hope of new beginnings, this is where we have new things we have not seen before. When the hope of new beginnings burned our feet, now we need it. Again, this is different from last time. Now we need it. And then we're back to the rhythm we had before. A heartbeat for a tin man. This is the same rhythm that we had for example, a river in a dry land or the last ace in a lost hand. And it's the same exact notes. A heartbeat for a tin man. Oasis in a singed land. Same notes, same rhythm, different words. Now, let's get into what changes here. Is remind us what we're here for, creating new life. So, new notes here. That's a scale degree 1. 1, 4, flat 3, flat 3, 2, 1, flat 3, flat 3, create a ting new life. And then that's tied over to page 7. Then we have creating. Ooh, 5. We've not had that since the verse. Rivers in the... An interesting melody ending on 4 here. So that creates a feeling of the song not being over. The song's not over. There are more parts of the song, but we're already at 7 pages here. So we're just gonna focus on this much of the song, which is already a lot. So having a melody end on 4, this brings us back to the concept that we explored with C418, having those notes that are not chord tones being used in the melody in a way that lets you know that it's not finished, that there's something still more to come. And that's what we can see here with this A note, scale degree 4, even though we have sure enough, the E minor chord is right here. The notes that are over this E minor chord is an A. If you think about it, that's 4. So that creates a feeling of instability and like you're not resting. So now let's go back to the beginning and let's do a Roman numeral analysis, and then we're going to go and talk about, well, perhaps we'll do it along the way during the Roman numeral analysis, how the chords change under the melody. Because as we talked about, this melody is exactly the same notes in exactly the same rhythm, basically copy and pasted a whole bunch of times. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. That's just how this song is. So to keep the interest, because the notes are not changing and they're repeated with the same rhythm, what's going to change is going to be the chords underneath that melody, and that's what's going to keep it interesting. And when I say interesting, I mean literally that you're going to listen to it and not be like, oh, it's just the same thing over and over again. You're going to hear and say, oh, this is different. This is something that is keeping my attention, is keeping me in the flow of what's going on. So let's start by writing our key, E minor, and a colon. Okay, and our first chord is going to be E. That's going to be Roman numeral 1, and that's all we have for the first page. So we can head on over to the second page in measure 37, where we have D, which is 7. Okay, now let's talk about measure 41. You'll see this a couple times throughout this song. So we have an A minor written, but we can see that there's some text next to it that says recommended play A major chord instead. Now this is for if you're actually playing the song. The A minor will work here. It works. And we should actually put our, not 6, we're not in C. And we should put our Roman numerals there. The difference here is that this A major is actually borrowed from a different key. And we've not really talked about that in theory level 1, which is why we have the A minor. But that A major is borrowed from, technically, D major, the key of D major, which when you harmonize a D major scale, goes major, minor, minor, major, major, D, some kind of E, some kind of F, some kind of G, some kind of A, gets us A major. And we've not talked about an A major in level 1, which is why we have this text to the side saying, hey, by the way, listen, if you know how to play an A major for this and you're playing an instrument, go ahead, play an A major. But if not, we can just understand it with an A minor. And then we're back in measure 45 to D. That's going to be Roman numeral 7. And then for a Tin Man, and then we go back to 7. So what we're seeing here as well is what we've talked about over a couple of these minor songs, is that a lot of times in minor keys with minor chords, you're going to see 1, 7, and 6. A whole lot. It shows up everywhere. Okay, Singed Land. Go 4. Measure 61 D. 7. Measure 65. It's going to be E. It's going to be a 1. And then we're hanging out on 1 for a long time. Okay, now here's where things really start to change. And this is what I want to point out. Is in 97, we have 6. This is the first time we've had a C chord in this song. And what's happening, as you see, don't ask why I'm ready, but I'm ready to strike him down now. This is the same exact melody we had all the way back from the very first 8 measures. Copied, pasted here. Same notes, same rhythm. But what the composer is doing is actually changing the chord underneath that melody, which makes the melody interesting in the sense that we know we've already heard it. 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 Okay, how boring did that get by the 3rd or 4th time? But if I go, we know we've already heard it. 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 So as I changed those chords there, did it not make what I was doing a little bit more interesting? So the point is, you can repeat stuff in music, but if you repeat it too much, it can get boring. However, if you change the chords underneath something that's repeated, it can actually make it really work very well and actually make it more interesting than it was to begin with, because we love to find patterns and things with our brains. And so when we can find the pattern of the melody and just have the chord change underneath, it sort of feels safe. It's like a safe exploration. It's like biking with training wheels. It's this sense of security that you have something that you recognize, but just a very small change in the chords. Okay, measure 105. We have minor 4. Then in measure 113, decision. And then this is interesting because we did not have something like this previously. We just have these 4 measures of D, and then these 4 measures of E minor, and then 7 launches us back into the chorus, a river in a dry land. 7 and 133. Okay, and then in 137 again, yeah, we're going to think about this as an A minor, but if you're playing this song and you know how to play an A major, play an A major chord instead. 141. 7. 145. A true A minor, just like we had another true A minor before, where, yeah, it's supposed to be A minor. So here we are, when the hope of new beginnings burned our feet. And this is the first time also we've had a B minor, so we actually have a minor 5 here. So what's interesting to see is that we have this copy-pasted thing happening here. A river and a dry land, last ace and a lost hand. These are the same rhythms. These are the same notes. Now this is what's changing this time around. We have new chords and a new melody. We have the A minor coming in for when the hope of new beginnings. We have the B minor coming, and that's different. We've not seen a B minor before. Burned our feet. And then we go to 6. Now we need it. Then we're at 7. So doing a 6, 7, 1. That's one of the most classic ways of getting back to 1 in a minor key, is to go 6, 7, 1. It's sort of driving us forward in as much of a way as the E natural minor scale can drive us forward, because remember, it doesn't have that leading tone. So it doesn't have that same oomph and that same draw, that same magnetic pull back to the 1. However, in minor keys, when you do 6, 7, 1 in terms of chords, that always drives you back to 1 in a very effective way. So 161, that's going to be minor 1. 165, D, that's going to be 7. 169, we're going to call that an A minor. 173, back to 7. Now, what we're here for, creating new life. What's interesting here is that we have the same chords as we had for when the hope of new beginnings cinched our feet. See, we have that A minor and that B minor, the A minor for 4 measures, the B minor for 4 measures. And see again here, in 177 and 181, we also have the A minor for 4 measures. We also have the B minor for 4 measures. But here's what's different. The melody this time is different. So while throughout a lot of this song, we've seen the melody stay exactly the same and the chords change, what we see here is the chords stay exactly the same, but the melody change. And the chords continue to stay the same, indeed, with a C, because we had that in the same order last time. So that's going to be our 6. Creating rivers, that's going to be 7. In the desert, ending on 1. So all in all, in this boss fight piece of music, some very interesting ideas and concepts and tools on display. In terms of taking a melody that is, well, honestly, I think we can call this a cool melody. I think it's a cool melody. Don 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 shaka don 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 shaka don 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 don. I think I messed the second part up, but you get the idea. It's like, it's cool. It sounds cool. You're not going to listen to that and be like, yeah, no, it doesn't sound cool. Rhythmically, the notes, it comes together. It sounds cool. So we take this cool sounding melody and we copy and paste it a bunch of times, because why not? It sounds cool. But here's the thing, because you don't want to hear literally the same thing over and over again, even though the melody is really cool, the composer changes the chords underneath the really cool melody, and that's part of what keeps interest. And then we see at the end of the song that the chords remain the same. They're repeated 2 times in a row. That A minor, B minor, C, D movement, so that 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 movement, driving us back to 1, which, by the way, is another strong way of looking at that you have essentially walking up the natural minor scale. 4, 5, 6, 7, driving us back to 1. We have that 2 times in a row, but the second time, the melody changes over the 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. So just to highlight that 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, we have in measure 145, A minor, that's 4. In 149, we have B minor, that's 5. In measure 153, we have C, which is 6. In 157, we have 7, which drives us back to 161, where we have 1. And we can see that again in 177. We have A minor, which is 4. 181, we have B minor, which is 5. In 185, we have C, which is 6. In 189, we have D, which is 7, which drives us back to 1 in 193. I will see you in the next lesson. I hope you had a ton of fun and really enjoyed analyzing these 10 game themes, seeing these compositional tools that are used, talking about the melody and the chords, how they work together, how they work against each other, how they change or how they don't change, and how the melody stays the same, how the chords change, how the chords change. The melody doesn't change. All these really cool insights that we gain through analysis. If you're interested in the Best Music Theory course for gamers level 2, make sure you shoot me an email at support@bestmusiccoach.com and just say, hey, I'm ready. Let's go. I'll see you either in the Facebook group or in the VIP Discord chat. I hope you had a ton of fun with this course, and I'll see you next time. Take care.